Good morning. There was a very important election the other day here in Massachusetts that wasn't really contested and didn't really get a lot of coverage, but it was very important nonetheless. It was the re-election of my guest this morning, Steve Tolman, to a second term as president of the Massachusetts labor organization. Mr. President, congratulations.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Good to see you. Now, you and your brothers in the AFL-CIO, brothers and sisters, you backed the loser in the governor's race last year, and you lost the fight against Governor Baker's MBTA reform plan, so why did you get reelected?
Well, Labor's agenda is much bigger than one or two issues. It's much bigger than any candidate, any political candidate. We also, helped elect Elizabeth Warren and Marty Walsh, but that doesn't mean that everything is perfect. The elections have consequences, both good and bad, and the members obviously were well thought, were really focused, John, I would say. I know, just kidding, of course. But I'm proud. Look, John, I left a job I loved in the Senate. I loved every bit of it. I really enjoyed it and worked hard at it. And I was asked to take, the helm at the AFL-CIO, and I'm happy I did it. 4 years into it, I'm getting my feet grounded, and I tell you, John, given middle class America where we are, it's my job as AFL-CIO, because we represent those organized and non-organized,
right,
to make sure people are aware, make sure people are voting, and make sure people know that if we work together, we can change some of the problems. But we have to work together in a constructive way.
Labor, individual organizations, the AFL-CIO does a lot of fantastic work, a lot of charitable work. I want to point that out because I want to raise a not-so-flattering news story that's been out about labor. What do you think when you see members of the Teamsters charged with conspiracy and extortion after allegedly using violence, profanity, and racial and homophobic slurs to harass and intimidate an out-of-town TV production crew?
John, it's interesting because if I saw how many times that's been in the papers, and not about 4 individuals, but about Teamsters. Teamsters have about 15,000 members, probably 20,000 members in Massachusetts, probably more. There's 4 bad apples.
This isn't the first story of this type,
but they're 4 bad apples, and you know what? It doesn't reflect on organized, like you just put it, and I thought Maura Healey, the Attorney General, had a nice piece in the paper where she said, heck, these people work with special needs kids. They raise money for autism, Sean O'Brien in particular. And people give their heart and soul to do right, and sometimes there are bad things. If we were to weigh the labor leaders that get into trouble to how about what Wall Street has done to America, or how about some of the bankers, or how about some of the inappropriateness in our journalism where it's one-sided. So yeah, they made mistakes, and nobody's proud of that, but it doesn't mean the labor movement is bad at all, John.
All right, well, when we come back from our break, I want to get into an issue that I know has been very close to your heart for many, many years, and that is the fight against addiction. And we'll be talking about that with the head of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO in just a moment. So please stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking with Steve Tolman, the newly re-elected president of the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. And Steve, going back to your years in the state Senate and even before, you've been a big activist for many years on issues surrounding addiction, its prevention and its treatment. You've praised Governor Baker's efforts to find answers to the terrible opioid epidemic we have here, and I know you're a part of that whole process. But you also told me when we were lining up this interview, you think we may need, in addition to whatever else we're doing, to take direct action against the manufacturers and distributors of these drugs. What do you mean?
Well, I'll tell you, John, what I mean is very simply, in the 1990s, Big Pharma, and it was just on a podcast the other night on WBUR, talked about, they basically identified Big Pharma as the cause of this national epidemic in America, and they claimed it was a brilliant marketing scheme to create a blockbuster drug, which has frankly devastated moms and dads, certainly on every street in Massachusetts.
You're talking about OxyContin?
OxyContin.
Yep.
But that's not all of them. All the derivatives of opiates. Now, there are people, John, that need pain medication. I want to be very clear. I know people need medication, and they should have it. but that's when it should be distributed, not to a person who gets a tooth pulled or a knee worked on. And they have done this. They have saturated, and it's the docs that have to bear responsibility.
Right.
They don't get proper training. Well, now it's all changing, but they didn't get proper training in these dangerous medications because they were never around, John. We banned opiates in 1914. In America, we recreated it in a synthetic form and never prepared the world for it.
So let's get specific. What do you think we need to do? Do we need legal action? Do we need new laws restricting the distribution of these drugs even further? Or?
I think you've really summarized it, John. It's all of the above. We have to be much more vigilant. First of all, now moms and dads are very clear that when our kids get injured with sports injuries, we're making sure we're talking to them and we know what they're prescribed.
Because, sorry for interrupting, but you'll recall, just a couple of years ago, Governor Patrick, then Governor Patrick, tried to step in and ban, I believe it was a specific drug, and the courts came in and said, you can't do that.
Right. Well, John, you know, the FDA approved these drugs, and certainly we believe the FDA should look at them. This epidemic is so entrenched in big pharma. They create drugs to deal with it. First the drugs get you hooked, then you get on heroin, then they create drugs to try to get you off it. Now they're saying that, oh, they should be on it like their whole life. If we could treat diabetes with a pill, we should be able to treat opiates with a pill, and it's just a little different, I think.
We just have about 30 seconds left, but I want to slip in one more question here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the national AFL-CIO has delayed making any endorsement in the presidential race. So I don't want to ask you to endorse anyone. You're not going to overstep your bounds there, but which presidential candidate has made the biggest impression on you so far, in either party?
Personally, I'd have to say Bernie Sanders. I'd have to say Bernie Sanders because, you know, he's talking about rural America. He's talking about middle-class America. He's talking about city America. He's talking about the people taking advantage of the laws and getting screwed by the laws. And it's time that middle class has to come up, work together, and put it in a better perspective that the middle class runs America, not the banks and the money people. I think that's what we have to do, John. Look, I'm not with Bernie yet. I have to respect the national, but most importantly, I think our candidates haven't all maybe appeared yet. Maybe there's still people thinking about this.
Oh, who'd you have in mind?
Well, you know, Joe Biden maybe, you know. That would interest me.
You like Joe Biden?
I think he's terrific.
Yeah.
I do.
Very interesting. Hey, thanks very much. Steve Tolman.
Thank you so much.
President, Massachusetts AFL-CIO. Always welcome here. And that's it for me. Now, back to my colleagues for more WBZ News.